All right, for this problem, we're going to be talking about weighted voting systems. The weighted voting system, 23 colon 13, 10, 8, 5, and 2, where 23 is going to be our quota. So that's something that you need to keep in mind when you're working on these particular problems. The quota is what is going to help me determine what a winning coalition is going to be. Okay. So this represents a partnership among 5 people, P sub 1, P sub 2, P sub 3, P sub 4, and P sub 5. The person P sub 5 wants to increase their power in the partnership and are prepared to buy shares. Remember that 1 share equals 1 vote from any of the other partners. Complete parts A through C below. So we'll start with part A. It says, suppose that each partner is willing to sell 1 share and that they are all asking the same price. Assuming that P sub 5 decides to buy only 1 share, from which partner should P sub 5 buy? Use the Banzhaf Power Index for your calculations. Choose the correct answer below. And your answers are going to be considered from P sub 4, P sub 1, P sub 3, and P sub 2. The first thing that we've got to remember is this is actually kind of a complex problem. We would have to go ahead and find the power index, which is simply a ratio between the player's critical count and the total critical count, which means that we have to go ahead and find all the winning coalitions, figure out which of these coalitions that each one of these partners is part of. Instead, what I'm going to recommend is that we use a web-based calculator for this. This particular web-based calculator is going to be at this address right here, http://cow.math.temple.edu/bpi.html. And when you type that into your web browser, this is the calculator that you're going to get. Okay? And you're going to start by left-clicking the BPI calculator. And what that is going to do is it's going to bring up a screen that's going to allow me to type in the quota and then the weights for each one of the people in the partnership. So what we're going to do is we will do that individually in just a moment. But first off, let's go ahead and determine what we need to be discussing right here. Remember that we have an initial voting system that starts right here. The quota is 23, and then P sub 1 is going to be 13, P sub 2 is 10, P sub 3 is 8, P sub 4 is 5, and P sub 5 is 2. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to consider what happens when one of these partners sells their share to P sub 5. Since there are 4 other partners in this group, I can end up with 4 alternative coalitions. So this is going to be the coalition when P sub 1 sells a share. P sub 1 sells 1 share to P sub 5. And that's going to change the coalition from 23 colon. The 13 will drop to 12, whereas the 10 will remain the same, the 8 will remain the same, and the 5 will remain the same. But however, P sub 5's vote count will go from 2 to 3. And this is what we're going to go ahead and calculate. We're going to put this into this calculator that I was just showing you. So we're going to type in the quota, which is 23. Then we're going to just tab into the next field, and we're going to type 12, 10, 8, 5, 3. And then we will left-click Send Your Data. And this is going to give us the power index setup. And all we're really concerned about is this right here, because this is showing me what the new power rankings are for each one of the partners in this group. And when I look at that, I can go ahead and just copy in this part right here. That is what we're keying in on, because we want to look at the percentages for P sub 5. Okay, and right now they've got 7.96%. So then what we want to do is go ahead and continue through this. So we're going to talk about P sub 2 selling 1 share. So P sub 2 sells 1 share. And that's going to mean that my numbers change from 23 colon 13, comma 9, comma 8, comma 5, comma 3. I'm going to type that back into my calculator, and I will end up with the following. Now you can see that the percentage for P sub 5 has changed dramatically. So whereas it was 7.96 when they purchased one share from P sub 1, it has now gone up to 12% when they have purchased one share from P sub 2. We need to go ahead and do this for all of the remaining potential coalitions. So the next example is going to be P sub 3 sells one share. So we start out with the original coalition. We've got the quota of 23. P sub 1 will be at 13. Likewise, P sub 2 will be at 10. But P sub 3 is going to drop to 7 because they've just sold a share. And then P sub 4 will be 3, and P sub 5 will still be at 3. We'll go ahead, run these numbers in the calculator, and then we're going to end up with this table. And we'll see now that P sub 5's power, or percentage, has dropped again. Okay? It is back down to 8.33%. We have one more alternative coalition that we need to speak about. And that's going to be when P sub 4 sells one share. And we'll go ahead and write that new coalition as 23 colon 13 comma 10 comma 8 comma 4 comma 3. Once again, I'm going to put that into the calculator, and that's going to give me this new arrangement. Notice that once again, P sub 5 is at 8.33%. So what I need to do is make sure that I understand which one of these coalitions gives P sub 5 the highest percentage. And that's going to be this particular coalition right here, where P sub 2 sells one of their shares to P sub 5. So then you would want to go ahead and select this as your choice. Okay, now for part B, suppose that each partner is willing to sell 2 shares and that they are all asking the same price. Assuming that P sub 5 decides to buy 2 shares from a single partner, from which partner should P sub 5 buy from? And use the Banzhaf Power Index for your calculations. Choose the correct answer below. Now remember, we still are going to have the same assumption for the initial system. And that's going to be with a quota of 23. And P sub 1 has 13. P sub 2 has 10. P sub 3 has 8. P sub 4 has 5. And P sub 5 has 2. And so in this first one, P sub 1 will sell 2 shares, which means that the coalition changes a little bit. And we end up with 23 colon 11 comma 10 comma 8 comma 5 comma 4. And this is what we're going to key into the calculator. So let's go ahead and look at the calculator. We type in the quota of 23. We're going to tab down. We're going to type in 11 comma 10 comma 8 comma 5 comma 4. Then we'll left click send your data. And once again, this is what I'm interested in, is this little table here. Now, notice that P sub 5 has 7.69%. That's not very much. So then we're going to look at P sub 2 selling 2 shares. That's going to be our next option. So P sub 2 sells 2 shares. And our new coalition looks like this: 23 colon 13 comma 8, comma 8, comma 5, comma 4. Okay. Now, once again, we type this into the calculator. We go ahead and calculate, and we end up with this information here. So remember, back in the first setup, we were looking at the fact that P sub 5 has 7.69. That's when P sub 1 is selling 2 shares. Now we notice that P sub 5 has 12% when P sub 2 is selling 2 shares. So our next choice is to say, okay, what happens if P sub 3 sells 2 shares but nobody else does? So P sub 3 sells 2 shares, and that's going to give me a new coalition of 23 colon 13 comma 10 comma 6 comma 5 comma 4. Now let's go ahead and do the calculation on this, and we're going to end up with the following. Notice that P sub 5 is actually dropped a little bit. And when P sub 5 has dropped a little bit, we can assume that that particular coalition is not going to work. The last one that we need to consider in this part of the problem is the fact that we will have P sub 4 selling to P sub 5. Remember, that's going to be 2 shares. Okay. And so we type it into the calculator. We calculate, and we bring this out, and we see that P sub 5 still does not have what it requires. So we look back. P sub 4 selling to P sub 5 is 8.3. P sub 3 selling to P sub 5 is 8.3. P sub 2 selling to P sub 5 is 12. And then P sub 1 selling to P sub 5 yields 7.69%. Which means that we have, so once again we see that P2 selling 2 shares to P5 will increase P sub 5's power to 12%, which means that when we go back up here, we can look at this particular answer, and we will go ahead and sign in right here. All right, the third and final part of this problem states if P sub 5 has the money and the cost per share is fixed, should P sub 5 buy 1 share or 2 shares from a single person? Explain. And then we're giving the following 4 options. Buying a single vote from P sub 2 raises P sub 5's power from 4% to 12%. Buying a second vote will raise it to approximately 15%. So P sub 5 should buy 2 shares from P sub 2 to increase P sub 5's power the most. That's not true. So we know that when we were looking at our problem, because if we look at the original, this is the original power distribution, okay? And we note that, yes, in fact, P sub 5 has a 4%. And this is going to be the distribution after P sub 2 sells 1 vote. Okay, so this is P sub 2 sells 1 vote. You'll notice that it did go up to 12%. Okay. But remember back from when we did P sub 2 selling 2 votes, we got this table. Now you'll notice that there's a line missing. But if you remember back, That was because we had another 8 in the distribution. I'll go back up and show you, which is right here, 138854. So it would be identical. So it only needs to be listed once. But that would also yield a 20%. So what do we notice? We note that P sub 5 starts out at 4%, buys 1 share, ends up at 12%. And even if P sub 5 were to buy another share, they would still be at 12%. So this is P sub 2 sells 2 votes. Because we did find that in all instances that... So we'll go back up and we'll look at this. We know that this one doesn't work because P sub 5's power never goes up to 15%. So we're buying a single vote from P sub 2. It raises it from 4 to 12. Buying a second vote does not raise the power, so P sub 5 should buy 1 share from P sub 2. All right, so now let's continue and look at this. Buying a single vote from P2 raises P5's power from 4% to 12%. And buying a second vote from P2 does not raise P5's power, so P5 should buy 1 share from P2 to increase P5's power the most. Since we've already talked about this, we know that this is the answer that's going to be true, because right here we go from 4% up to 12%, and it doesn't change. And over here it talks about raising it to 8%, which... that's great, but that's not nearly as much as 12%, so we can automatically discount this one. And then this one talks about raising it to approximately 8%, which is true, but we don't need to worry about that one. So our answer is buying a single vote from P sub 2 raises P sub 5's power from 4% to 12%, and that's exactly where we're at.